Hello everyone, this is Mr. Young. I hope everyone's doing well. I thought I'd spend a bit of time and show you guys how to do a few of the things I've asked you to do. I realize that we're not under ideal circumstances, and I know everyone's trying hard and trying their best, and I think we all appreciate that. Certainly the situation we face isn't a normal one, and it's something that's difficult really for everybody. But I know that if we try hard and we understand why we have to do it, then it goes by a little bit more easily, and everything. Hopefully, we can come out of this the other side with a deeper understanding, with a bit more learning about many different things. And it's tough experiences like this that build character. Anyway, I won't dwell on that. Today I'd just like to show you a couple of basic things I've asked you to do. Number one was to download Blender. A few people have been asking me about that. And there's a link here in Schoology. And now I'm showing 8A, but of course this is going to be the exact same thing for the 8B students as well. So it's exactly the same thing. So if we go to the Blender website, clicking on this link, it's going to open up this page in Schoology. Now, it won't actually work properly in Schoology. This is very important. You have to remember this for every single link that you open in Schoology. You always, always, always have to click this icon here on the top right to open the link in a new page. And I think I did email a few of you with the direct link, which is actually the one that you go to if you click this. So this is the Blender page. This is blender.org, right? And it shows you a whole bunch of different things about Blender, and it's really gives you good information about Blender, and gives you sort of a promotional overview of what is, what Blender does, who's using Blender, and how it all works. But anyway, what we want to do is we want to download it. And so what we're going to do is click this button here. You can also, I think I sent a mass email out, a class announcement. The link in that class announcement, that email, not email, but the Schoology message, is exactly this right here. So it'll take you to this page without clicking on that. It just saves you a step. You don't have to click on that first page. So this is what the page you'll end up going to. Click on Download Blender. Right now, this is version 2.82a. The one that I'm using in class with you guys is an older version. It's 2.79, and it is a bit different. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But for now, we're just gonna download. So we click this. Yours should automatically, it should say something different. I'm using a Macintosh computer, so it's gonna say Mac OS. Yours should say PC, or it should say Linux if you're using Linux. And you just click this. It knows what computer you have. And so now you can see it's downloading here, and it's going to take a little while to do that. And this, by the way, will download everything to the default location on your computer, which usually is your downloads folder. So that's where you should see it. It'll say Descargas on your home computer. Mine, of course, says downloads, but it's the same thing, and it's actually pretty quick. Now, again, this is going to be, I'm going to show you what I do with the Macintosh computer, because it is what I have, but it should be similar with yours. You'll have an exe file if you're using a PC, and Linux might be a pkg file. I can't remember exactly, but either way, it'll give you instructions, so it shouldn't be too difficult to do it. So I'm gonna show in Finder. This is my DMG file, which stands for disk image. Again, this is a Macintosh, so yours will be different, likely, unless you have a Mac. So it's opening it, verifying it, and all I have to do, again, with the Macintosh, is I have to drag. Once it opens, I just have to drag this file into my folder, which I've already done, so I'm not going to do it again. But if I do that, well, I'll do it, and it'll tell me that I already have one in there, probably. But that's all you have to do with the Mac. So I'm not going to do it in this case, because I've already installed it. but you just have to, I think, open up the exe file and let Blender do its thing. It will install itself. There shouldn't be any issues. I've used PCs and Linux machines. It's pretty straightforward. So that's how to install Blender. Okay, and you can get rid of these because you don't need them again. And by the way, there's an interesting. Hopefully, I did send out an announcement for this a week ago. The updates section. You guys might want to check that out. It's got some interesting stuff. You might like what is being said. This is, again, from early on when we just started having our lockdown. But you can take some time to read that. And you can like and comment on it, too. I'm not going to take marks off if you haven't got your work done. I think I said in my email that I want everyone to do their work first. The important thing is to get your work done. But once it's done, you can spend a bit of time reading this, and you can post comments and maybe make a discussion. I don't know if your parents might be interested or friends might be interested in seeing some of these things. I've only got 3 up. There will be more soon, so you can check if you're killing time on the computer and you want to take a look at interesting things about the situation we're all facing. Then you can go to that there. And I will have some upbeat news about it within the next couple of days. There's something I wanted to share with you guys, which I thought was very helpful, and it kind of makes me more optimistic about the outlook. It's not going to be forever. It's going to be ending, and I'm going to show you what that will look like. Anyway, for now, let's go back into Blender. So now that we have Blender open, or now that we have Blender installed, rather, we're going to open up Blender. But before we do that, we're going to go back into our instructions. So if you need to review the parts of the Blender interface, you can click on that, download that to your computer. That's a picture file. That may be helpful because I'm going to be referring to the windows that I talked about by name, and you sort of have to know which windows are what. The 3D view window, the properties window, the outliner window. If those terms are, if you're not quite sure what those terms mean, if you don't remember, go back and check this, because you will need to know those for the assignments. So here we go with the first one. Now I showed you how to do this in class, but again, I'll give you a review. Partly because it's always helpful to review, but also because we are using a different program, a different version of Blender, a different version of the same program. So here we go with the instructions. Now I'm going to be flipping back and forth so you can kind of read this. What might be useful is if you have this on your own screen, maybe open one on your computer and one on your cell phone. You can hear me on your cell phone and watch this on your computer, or whatever's easier. I'm not sure. Blender, by the way, doesn't work on cell phones on any mobile devices because it's not compatible with the architecture that they use. The processor is slightly different, and it doesn't work. But that shouldn't be an issue for most of you because most people still have computers. So what we're going to do is we're going to open Blender. So after you've installed it, you should know where it is. Again, this is what I do to open it. You might have to go to your start screen, which is usually in the bottom left, and find it on your computer and open it. But now that it's open, this is the splash screen, right? Usually it has files listed on here if you've been working on files in the past. But because this is new, there are no files there. So you just click on outside of the screen, anywhere outside the screen, and to get rid of it. Now you have a cube in front of you. And I've given you instructions. Actually, I'll read them to you. There's instructions that will help you navigate and move it around and move around your view so you can see different things. Basically, you're using your mouse to move, and it says it right here on number 3. This is kind of the instructions on how to move your view around so you can better see objects. So you can rotate the view by holding down the scroll wheel. Again, that's the wheel that you use if you use the scroll wheel. If you use the scroll wheel, you scroll up and scroll down. It'll zoom in and zoom out. It'll look like this: zooming in, zooming in, and zooming out. Right? But if you use the scroll wheel as a button and you hold it down, right, then you move the mouse around. You'll actually move the view around so you can see around to the other side of the object, right? And I think I've explained these to you. These are the axis lines. You can see the up is usually referred to as Z. That's up and down, right? You can't really see on this version of Blender, they kind of hide the Z axis. But anyway, the Y is this one right here that goes this way, and the X is the one that goes this way. So Z up and down, Y this way, X this way. And again, it's a bit arbitrary because I can spin around and make everybody dizzy. And as long as you remember which one is which, it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, again, going back to our instructions, it says delete the default cube by moving the mouse arrow into the main 3D view window. So that's what this window is, the main 3D view window. So the mouse is in here, okay? Now we have to make sure that this cube is selected, which means it's outlined in yellow, which it is. If it was not, then it wouldn't have that outline on it. Now it's outlined in yellow. And again, when you're selecting an object in Blender, you use the right mouse button to select. Okay, that's how it's set up by default. You can change that, but for now, just remember that. So I press X and delete. And by the way, if you caught that X that just showed up there, that won't show up on yours. I've got a special function enabled so that I can show you which keys I'm pressing. It's called screencast keys, but again, it won't show up on your computer when you do that. But it is useful if you want to see which keys I'm pressing. Take a look at the bottom left. And that will tell you what I'm pressing. And by the way, if you make a mistake, if you accidentally erase something that you didn't mean to erase, all you have to do is press Control and Z, or Z as they say in the United States, and that will bring it back. That will undo your last operation, whatever it was, whether it was erasing something or adding something or changing something. It'll automatically go back one step, and you can keep going back as far as you want, 2 or 3 times if you've made 2 or 3 mistakes in a row, which is kind of useful. It's a useful thing to know, a useful function to have. So again, if I make a mistake, if I press X and I delete the cube and I didn't mean to, then Control Z brings it back. Okay? So, but I actually didn't, that wasn't an accident. I actually did mean to delete it, so there it goes. It's now gone to cube heaven, and the next step is I want to add a shape, and Blender actually is pretty intuitive, pretty straightforward with its shortcuts. Usually it starts with the first letter. Sometimes there's a modifier key like Shift or Control first. In this case, add starts with the letter A, and you have to press Shift before A in this particular case, but usually it's just the letter itself. But in the case of adding, you need the Shift. So Shift A on the keyboard to bring up the Add menu, and you're going to select Text. And I'm going to show you what that looks like now. So if I press Shift A for Add, and it's not working, Shift A for Add, there we go, and Text. Okay, it'll bring me something that looks like that. Now, on the instructions, it says I have to rotate. This is why I put this in number 3, because you're going to have to rotate that around so that you can read it properly. So we have to rotate this. We were using our scroll wheel as a button to move this around, and anything that looks somewhat like this is fine. You just want it to, you just want to be able to see it in your screen. Now, I can't do anything. I can move this text, but I can't change it unless I change the mode that my that Blender is in. Right now it's in object mode, and if I press the tab key, I put it into edit mode. And the modes in this version, in the old version it was down here. The ones that you use at school, it's down here. This version, it's up here. Okay, so if I press the tab key, T-A-B, right, that will change the different modes. You could also click this as well. If you want to go to select object mode or edit mode, you can actually click it on your screen. But it's I like the shortcuts because they save a lot of time. When you get used to them, if you learn them at the beginning, then it saves you lots of time later on when you're trying to do complicated things. So I'm going to change my text to say my name. It's going to be your name, whatever your name is. In my case, I'm using my Spanish alias, Roberto Joven. And now, again, after I finish writing it, I'm going to have to change the mode again back into object mode so that I can use it as an object. And I can move that around and modify it. So I'm gonna hit the tab key, or you can again press this on the screen. And so now Roberto Joven is here, but it's kind of looking a bit flat. Right? Not a lot of depth to that word. Hopefully the person has a little bit more depth in reality, but I guess you could be the judge of that. But what I'm doing now is I'm going to add depth to my letters. And I do that, so I've changed this. That was number 4, changing from object mode to edit mode by pressing the tab key. Now, and I changed what the text said. Okay, so it's going to be my first and my last name. Now it's back into object mode, so those are the 3 steps we just did. Now we're going to move our mouse arrow to the border between the 3D view window and the properties window. Okay, so this is again a quiz. This is a test to see what you guys remember. This is the 3D view window. Okay, this is the properties window right here. So all I'm saying to do is to put the mouse right between the two until it turns into a line with 2 arrows going left and right, right? And if I click and hold this down, right, I can drag this. All I'm doing is I'm making these 2 windows bigger. This is the outliner window, right? We went over that in class. This is the properties window. Okay. All I've done is I've made it bigger, and it's just a bit easier to see. This is all I'm saying with that instruction there. Now, in this version of Blender, all of these tabs go up and down on the left-hand side of the properties window. In the old version, the one at school, they're up top here. So that's another difference between the 2 interfaces. But it's the same. They're roughly the same icons, and they do the same thing. So it's not that different really. So going back here, some of you might have been lost because you wouldn't know what this. So you'll know you're in the right place when it changes to a 2-way arrow, which is what we just did, what we saw. We dragged it across. Now, this won't actually be the same because it doesn't say F anymore. I didn't really understand why it said F to begin with. I think font starts with F. But in the new version of Blender, right, it's an A, which makes more sense. So we're going to this right here, right? And again, this has to be highlighted in yellow, the text that we just added. Okay, so now we see a bunch of different properties that can affect the text that we've just made. I'm not going to show you what those are except for the most important ones that we're going to use, which in this case, in fact, I don't need to have those open at all. I'm going to open up the geometry. Okay, and this is what I talked about in class. When you push Play-Doh through a screen with a bunch of holes in it, you get spaghetti Play-Doh, and that process is called extrusion. That's the fancy name for squirting something through a hole to give it depth, right? We call that extrusion. That's extruding. We call it the processes in when we make metals involve extrusion. 3D printing is really extruding plastic through a little nozzle, through a hole, melted plastic. All these things are examples of extrusion. But if you think of Play-Doh, everyone, I think every one of you has probably played or at least knows about Play-Doh and has seen Play-Doh getting squirted through a hole to make a long sort of stringy thing. That's what extrusion is. So we're just going to make this 0.1 is probably more than enough. As soon as we hit enter on our keyboard, we'll see instantly that it becomes bigger, that it has depth. So now it's three-dimensional. It was two-dimensional before. It had no depth. Now it's three-dimensional. And bonus marks for the direction of the extrusion. Which axis was it extruded on? X, Y, or Z? Hopefully you guys said Z, right? Up and down, because that's the way it got extruded. Now, it doesn't have to be Z. If I'll show you this later on, if this had been oriented in a different direction, if I had rotated my text in a different direction, then it would be extruded along a different axis, right? But in this case, it was laying flat, perpendicular to the Z plane. It was laying on the X and the Y plane, right? Again, before it had depth, it looked like this, right? Then it was extruded in the Z direction, the Z along the Z axis. Okay, so here we go. This is all you have to do for this exercise. All you need is your name with depth, right? Extruding it to give it depth. And I'm going to show you how to save it. Now this is important because sometimes Blender, it's a pretty stable program, but it can crash, and sometimes you just make a mistake, and you want to make sure that you save your file regularly. Anytime you make a major change, I recommend saving your file. Now we only did really one thing. We didn't do anything too terribly complicated, so I'm saving it at the end. But you'll want to save it frequently, maybe every few minutes, or I generally say every time I make a big change, I save it. And the way I save it too, I should show you this now. Again, go to File, Save As. Okay. Now, on the top left here are a bunch of different selections. These are the locations where you would save it. Yours in the school computers, it would be that's where the Zeta colon drive is. The Z drive is your place in the school server. Obviously, I'm not at school, neither are you. So you can choose a directory where you'll remember. So choose a location that you think means something to you. And I'm going to actually go to downloads because I like to store my stuff in downloads. And this is the name of your file. So I'm going to call it, I'll just call it Roberto Hoban. Okay. Now, all Blender files should have a .blend after them. This is called an extension, right? Oops. This is called an extension, and it tells your computer what program to open it with. That's how it keeps your programs, how it keeps your files separate and knows which file goes with what application. And if you forget to put the blend on it, and I try to save it, it will automatically add the blend extension, but it's always good to have it. I mean, I usually type it in just in case, but it does remember it and it does put it in. But all you have to do is press Save As. Okay, and it should automatically save it to your in this case I've saved it to my downloads folder, which is right here. Okay, and when you do that, I was going to explain this to you guys. If you're saving it as you go, usually what I do is I'll call it 1 the very first time I save it, and then if I make a change, I'll call it 2, and then 3, all the way up as high as it goes. I have some files that literally have hundreds of numbers, or 3 digits after them, because I'm in the hundreds, and it sounds silly, but if you've ever made a mistake, 3 or 4 saves ago and you want to go back to that version, it's a lot easier just to go back to the original file, because it doesn't, sometimes if you make a change and you save over it, then you'll lose that change and you might have to start over. So I always, they don't take up a lot of space, so you don't have to worry about clogging up your hard drive. Save it as something else. Now, obviously, in this case, we don't need to do that because it's such a small, simple project. But get in the habit of doing that, because it'll save you lots and lots of time later on if you ever decide you want to make a big project in Blender. Okay, so that's it for this one. I will show you the next one in the next video. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.